For months after September 11, 2025, questions circled the name of Yu Menglong like a storm that refused to pass. Fans waited. Media speculated. Insiders whispered behind closed doors. Then suddenly, the forensic report was released. And what it revealed left people speechless. Tonight, you are not just hearing rumors. You are about to walk step by step through the most talked about findings, the emotional moments inside the report that shocked investigators, and the hidden details fans are only now beginning to understand. Stay with me until the end, because one specific discovery in this report is what many believe finally changed the entire conversation around Yu Menglong's tragic death. Because what looked simple at first quickly became something far more complicated. When officials quietly confirmed the forensic analysis was complete, few expected the emotional impact the document would carry. For weeks, the public imagined a cold, clinical report filled only with technical language. Instead, what emerged painted a deeply human picture of Yu Menglong's final known hours. Sources familiar with the findings described the atmosphere inside the review room as unusually heavy. One analyst reportedly paused midway through reading, removed their glasses, and sat back in silence. That alone tells you something about what was inside. According to the released summary, forensic experts reconstructed a careful timeline of Yu Menglong's last movements on September 11, 2025. Digital traces, environmental readings, and physical evidence were all cross-referenced to build the clearest possible picture. And the first major revelation immediately caught attention. There were no signs of forced entry into the private space where he was last confirmed to be. At first glance, that might sound straightforward. But investigators didn't stop there. Because what truly unsettled observers was what came next. The report emphasized that several personal items belonging to Yu Menglong were found arranged in a way described as unusually orderly for the situation. Not staged. Not disturbed. Just carefully placed. That detail alone has sparked intense discussion across fan communities. Was it coincidence? Habit? Or something more deliberate in his final hours? Forensic specialists are known for choosing their words carefully, and the phrasing in this section has been analyzed repeatedly by online sleuths. But the emotional turning point of the report came from a much quieter observation, one that many viewers nearly missed. Investigators noted evidence suggesting Yu Menglong had been working on music shortly before the timeline ended. Yes, music. Data recovered from his personal devices indicated recent audio activity within hours of September 11. No dramatic conclusions were drawn in the official wording, but the implication hit fans hard. Because it connects directly to the unreleased song that later moved the world when his son performed it. Suddenly, the timeline didn't just feel technical. It felt personal. Imagine the weight of that moment, knowing he may have been immersed in creativity, focused on sound and emotion, not realizing how close the world was to losing him. That is the detail many fans say broke them. And yet, the forensic team continued deeper. Environmental analysis reportedly confirmed no unusual chemical hazards in the immediate area. Temperature readings, air quality markers, and surface scans were all described as within normal ranges. In other words, no obvious external environmental trigger. But then came the section that truly made the internet pause. Biometric data recovered from wearable tech indicated elevated stress markers earlier in the day. Not panic levels, but noticeably above his recent baseline. The report does not speculate on cause, and that silence has only intensified public curiosity. Because stress leaves many possible explanations. Work pressure, personal concerns, physical exhaustion. Without context, the data raises questions without fully answering them. And that's exactly why this case continues to hold the world's attention. One particularly emotional detail described how investigators carefully preserved several handwritten notes found among Yu Menglong's personal belongings. Officials have not publicly released the full contents, but they confirmed the writings were creative in nature. Creative. That single word sent fans into emotional overdrive. Many now believe these notes may connect to unreleased artistic material still in the family's possession. Music insiders have quietly hinted that the late actor-singer had been exploring a more personal musical direction in 2025. If true, the forensic timeline doesn't just document his final day. It captures a creative chapter that was still unfolding. And that realization is what has made this report hit so differently compared to typical case updates. Because behind every data point, there was still a human story. Another moment from the findings that deeply moved viewers was the confirmation that Yu Menglong had been in routine digital contact with close associates in the days leading up to September 11th. Nothing in those exchanges was flagged as alarming by investigators. To many fans, that detail felt both comforting and heartbreaking at the same time. Comforting because it suggested normalcy. Heartbreaking because it reinforced how unexpected the tragedy truly was. Since the report's release, emotional reactions have poured in from around the world. Some fans say the findings brought a sense of closure. Others feel the carefully worded conclusions still leave space for lingering questions. And that tension between clarity and mystery is exactly why this story continues to dominate conversations. Because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with loud answers. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in carefully chosen forensic language that forces everyone to read between the lines. What remains undeniable is the impact Yu Menglong left behind. From his acting career to his music, and now to the deeply emotional response surrounding this report, his presence continues to ripple through the industry and among fans globally. And if the ongoing interest in his unreleased work is any indication, the world may not have heard the last chapter of his artistic legacy. But now I want to hear from you. After everything revealed in the forensic report, do you feel this finally brings clarity to what happened on September 11th, 2025? Which detail in the findings surprised you the most? And do you believe more of Yu Menglong's unreleased music should be shared with fans in the future? The moment the forensic report dropped, the internet didn't just react, it erupted. Within minutes of the official release tied to the September 11th, 2025 tragedy of Yu Menglong, screenshots of key lines began circulating across fan pages, private group chats, and late-night livestream discussions. But while headlines focused on the big conclusions, the real emotional weight of Part 1 was buried in the quiet details most people almost overlooked. And once fans started reading those details carefully, everything changed. Because Part 1 of the forensic findings wasn't loud or dramatic on the surface. It was calm, clinical, almost gentle in tone. But beneath that calm language was something deeply unsettling. Investigators described the reconstruction of Yu Menglong's final known hours with almost surgical precision. Digital timestamps, environmental readings, and personal activity logs were layered together like pieces of a fragile puzzle. The goal was simple: create the clearest possible picture of what happened on that September day. What they found painted a moment frozen in time. One of the most talked about details from Part 1 was the condition of the personal space where he was last confirmed to be. According to the report summary, nothing appeared violently disturbed. No obvious signs of struggle. No chaotic displacement of objects. Instead, everything appeared composed. Observers inside the review team reportedly used the phrase unusually orderly more than once during internal discussions. That wording has since become one of the most debated phrases online. Because for many fans, it raises a haunting emotional image. A room that looked normal. A moment that felt ordinary. And yet, it would soon become the center of one of the most heartbreaking headlines of the year. What makes this detail so powerful is how human it feels. There was no cinematic chaos. No dramatic visual shock. Just stillness. And sometimes stillness is far more chilling. But the forensic team didn't stop with the physical environment. The deeper they analyzed the digital timeline, the more emotionally charged the picture became. Recovered device activity showed that Yu Menglong had been interacting with audio files not long before the timeline ended. Investigators were careful not to speculate publicly, but insiders familiar with the review process described the discovery as deeply moving for those who knew his passion for music. That single data point quietly connected Part 1 of the report to the emotional wave that later followed his son's performance of the unreleased song. Suddenly, this wasn't just a technical investigation anymore. It was a story about unfinished creativity, Imagine the scene: the forensic experts were reconstructing a man immersed in sound, possibly reviewing melodies, adjusting recordings, or listening back to something deeply personal. The room calm. The environment stable. Nothing outwardly alarming. And yet, within hours, the world would be asking questions that still echo today. Another detail from Part 1 that continues to fuel discussion is the biometric information recovered from wearable data. The report confirmed elevated stress indicators earlier on September 11, though officials were careful to emphasize that the levels did not suggest extreme distress. Still, the shift was noticeable. And that nuance has kept analysts and fans talking non-stop. Because stress doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides beneath routine. Sometimes it shows up in subtle physiological signals that only become meaningful in hindsight. Experts reviewing the summary noted that the stress markers appeared gradually rather than suddenly. That pattern has led many observers to believe the timeline of Yu Menglong's final day may have involved mounting pressure rather than a single dramatic trigger. But again, the official report stops short of drawing conclusions. And that careful restraint is exactly what makes Part 1 so emotionally powerful. It gives just enough clarity to ground the timeline, but leaves just enough silence to keep the questions alive. One of the most quietly heartbreaking elements of the findings involved handwritten material recovered among his belongings. Authorities described the writings as creative in nature, a phrase that has now taken on almost symbolic weight among fans. Creative. Not business-related. Not administrative. Creative. For many supporters, that word alone reshaped how they emotionally processed the entire timeline. It suggested that even in his final documented hours, Yu Menglong's mind may have been focused on expression, artistry, and future projects. Not closure. Not farewell. But creation. That realization hit the fan community like a wave. Because it reinforces the feeling that whatever happened on September 11, 2025, interrupted a story that was still actively being written. Another subtle but widely discussed point from Part 1 involved Yu Menglong's recent communication patterns. Investigators confirmed routine digital contact with close associates in the days leading up to the tragedy. Nothing in those exchanges was flagged as urgent or alarming. For many viewers, this detail brought a complicated mix of emotions. On one hand, it painted a picture of normalcy, someone still connected, still engaged with people around him. On the other hand, it deepened the sense of shock surrounding the suddenness of the loss. Because when tragedy strikes without clear warning signs, the emotional impact tends to linger much longer. And that lingering feeling is exactly what has kept this case at the center of online conversations months later. What Part 1 ultimately delivers is not a dramatic twist or a single explosive revelation. Instead, it offers something far more haunting. A quiet reconstruction of ordinary moments that now carry extraordinary weight. A calm room. Active music files. Creative notes. Subtle stress signals. Routine conversations. Each piece, on its own, feels almost mundane. But together, they form a final snapshot that many fans say is almost impossible to forget. And perhaps that is why the release of the forensic report didn't close the emotional chapter for the public. If anything, it opened a deeper, more reflective phase of the conversation. Because sometimes the most powerful truths are not the loud ones. Sometimes they are the quiet details that slowly sink in, long after the headlines fade. But now I want to hear directly from you. Which detail from Part 1 of the forensic report affected you the most? Do you think the creative materials found among Yu Menglong's belongings suggest he was preparing something big? And after everything revealed so far, do you feel closer to understanding what truly happened on September 11, 2025, or do you still have questions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this deep dive gave you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional investigations and exclusive updates.